From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. I am Nick Barris. This is The Plus, and it is, it's Tuesday. And we're going to take your phone calls if you want to join us in a moment here. Conversation, we're talking about guns. I think Tennessee, a strong Second Amendment state. People here love to hunt. They love to have their personal defense. I think gun laws here make headlines, and the legislature working on such every year. And we're going to talk about that and other issues with our guest, John Harris from the Tennessee Firearms Association. It's good to have you on, sir.
Thank you much.
Always a pleasure. A strong advocate for guns. This is not a debate this morning or pushing some agenda necessarily one way or the other. So we'd like to have him on to get that perspective. And I know many of you may have questions for him. But I guess, John, what's going on these days? There's a lot of different things we can touch bases on. Before we get to the legislation, and you told me there's some stuff coming up, just your take. When you're at home and then you're watching the news, and I know it's Channel 5 because you're a loyal viewer, and you see a report on, for instance, most recently, the mass shooting in Kalamazoo, Michigan, the 6 dead, and I think it was 6 dead, or whatever incident it may be, and you see this, what goes through your mind first thing when you see something like that? Are you thinking, uh-oh, what's the spin going to be, or gosh, I wonder if this guy had this gun legally, or what goes through your mind?
Typically, what I think goes through the mind of not only myself, but a lot of gun owners is, a great deal of sadness that you got victims of that event.
Okay,
that's really the main, because frankly, it doesn't matter how many laws we pass. It doesn't matter how much we go online and preach about being safe and responsible with guns. The fact is, there are people in our society that are mentally unstable, that are crazy, or that have terrorist motives. Yeah. And whether it's a gun or a bomb, or he drove them off a cliff into a lake, they're going to commit crimes. They're going to commit harm. The gun tends to be a frequent tool because of the efficiency of the item. But Columbine, they had bombs set up everywhere, and so I think the first thought always has to be for the people involved.
Yeah. Okay. And then beyond that, do you pay attention? Do you believe spin happens afterwards?
Oh, it absolutely does.
On both sides?
Yeah, but I think the public has gotten so used to the spin that it's just background chatter at this point, except for the ones that are really, bought into either one side or the other.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay, well, we can talk more about that, and some of our viewers may have calls or questions on that. And before we get to some of the phone calls, I did want to say, is it later this week? What constitutional carry, is that coming up in the legislature?
Oh,
or is it next week?
Representative Judd Matheny has a bill that is on notice tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the House Civil Subcommittee. Okay. It is a bill on constitutional carry in the state of Tennessee.
Define that again for our viewers.
Yeah, constitutional carry is this concept that says if you're an adult, his bill in particular says if you're 21 and up and you can legally possess the firearm, then you don't have to pay a fee. You don't have to pay the equivalence of a poll tax. You don't have to have mandatory state database with your name in it. You don't have to do any of that kind of stuff if you're old enough to legally possess it. And you do legally possess it. You should be able to walk around in the possession of your firearm without having to have a license or a permit that says it's okay.
So as it stands now, you have to have a license or a permit.
Right now, well, the interesting thing is we looked at data this week because of this particular bill. Right now, you have to have what they call a civilian handgun permit in Tennessee. Those permits are issued. You have to have training. It takes 3 days basically to get it. You got to be trained. You got to go see the Department of Safety and fill out an application, pay a fee, and then go see a fingerprinting source. Okay. We pulled data from the Department of Safety that shows between 2008 and 2014. That's the most recent data they've released. But for that 7-year period or 6-year period, the Department of Safety has overcharged the citizens of the state of Tennessee by $17 million.
What do you mean overcharged?
Well, they report in their reports for that period of time how much revenue they took in from issuing the permits, and they reported their operational cost. And the difference between the two is an overcharge. So they've overcharged the people of the state $17 million just to issue these permits.
So you're saying that the price of these permits could be lower?
Oh, it could be cut in half.
Could be cut in half.
Yeah, if you
So the whole
average-
idea of the money that comes from the sale of these permits is just for this agency to continue to operate?
That's what they say, but there's been some testimony, I understand, from Senator Beavers reporting that Commissioner Givens has said recently that the Department of Safety is taking that excess funding, and instead of reducing the fees, the Department of Safety is transferring the money to other uses. And that likely violates the original intent of the statute, which says this fee is only to run this program, and you're not supposed to use the money for anything else.
Okay. So if constitutional carry moves forward, does that then mean if someone then can just go buy a gun and have it, that there's no other way to track or be aware of who owns guns and who doesn't?
Well, the permit lets you track who has been issued the permit, but that doesn't tell you really who owns guns, because it's a much larger population that has guns, either by inheritance or they've bought it, they just don't carry it,
yeah, right.
or they're hunters or recreational shooters or collectors. There's a lot of people, a lot of police officers don't have permits because they don't have to have permits. A lot of other people are exempted out of the permitting requirements, judges, for example.
So you want to pass that on to just the general public to be exempt
Well,
from
what
that?
we want to do is make Tennessee more like the bulk of the other states. 29 other states, 60% of the states don't require any permit at all for their citizens to carry guns.
So in which case then, you go buy your gun. Now, you still would have to go through a process when you buy a gun where they do a background check on
If you buy it from a dealer, you have to go through the background check.
Okay, but then once you buy it, then you would not need to seek to get a permit. to
Right,
carry
it'd be
it.
like walking into Walmart and buying a pocket knife.
Anything, a pocket knife. And then from that point, is there, in your mind, playing a devil's advocate, what would the critics say to that?
Well, the critics tend to speculate that that's a very dangerous, risky move. And I think that argument fails to hold any credibility when you realize that 29 other states do this, and the risk of injury or accidental shooting or even criminal use of those firearms in those states is no higher.
Hasn't made a difference then.
Yeah,
has it?
than it is in Tennessee. So the permitting system that's costing, I think the gross revenue for that period 08 to 14 was like $52 million. So the gross revenue on the people of the state to allow them to carry firearms doesn't provide any tangible benefits.
And if you would, to get a permit, you have to do what?
To get a permit, you have to take a minimum 8-hour training course that the Department of Safety...
Isn't that a good thing?
Well, you could argue that it's a good thing, but you've got a lot of people that own guns that have never had the training course, and the incident of injury or accidental shooting or criminal activity with that population of the segment of the population is no higher. And then once again, 29 states don't require any training at all, and they don't have a higher rate of misconduct or criminal activity. So if it's no evidence to prove that training makes a difference, then why impose it? Again, we don't require people when they go buy kitchen knives to have a training course on how to sharpen them. We just let them buy the knives.
So in addition to the 8-hour training course, what else for the permit?
You then have to go to the Department of Safety and you fill out an application for the permit, which requires that you be fingerprinted and photographed. The fingerprinting actually takes place at a third location. And then they run a complete background check on you.
Okay,
But
is
it's
that
much
a
the
bad
same.
thing?
Well, the background check is almost identical, not entirely, but almost identical to one that they run when they do your firearms purchase that they only charge you $10 for. Safety, however, charges $115 for essentially the
But
same
again,
background
you did
check.
say that not everyone gets their guns by buying them through
No,
an
they don't.
established dealer. So
I would say, though, most gun owners, the vast majority of gun owners, acquire their guns at some point during their career, at least one of them from a dealer. So they've been through a background check. You are going to have some people that either inherit a gun, buy a gun, steal a gun, or make a gun that don't go through a background check because they have never gone to a retail dealer. But most people end up at some point
I would
going to
think
dealers.
most of them, that's where you see.
Right.
Have you ever made a gun?
Not one that really works.
Okay, I was wondering, because I know you're a craftsman and you're
Well,
a big
you know,
gun collector. I didn't know if you ever made a gun.
You know, I can say this, having seen some of the news stories about schools, I've made Pop-Tarts that look like guns.
Yeah, I'll eat one of those. I won't shoot one, but I'll eat one. Let's take one phone call before we maybe go to the break. I'm sorry, line one, is it Joe? Yeah, Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Joe.
John.
Morning, Joe.
All the legislation that you got before the legislature this year, which one or which ones do you think will actually pass since this debacle at the Legislative Plaza where Ron Ramsey says there's no law up there against carrying a gun, and he didn't have any problem with it. Then Beth Harwell comes back and says, oh, it's going to cost $1.5 million to remove the signs from the Legislative Plaza, and so they killed that. And it's not a law, it's just a rule that they made up. So, I mean, I'm confused about what's going on at the legislature.
Isn't that interesting? And okay, that's great, Joe. Do we want to take a break first, or should we touch on that for a moment? Okay, we'll take a break. When we come back, I'm glad Joe brought that up about the Ledge Plaza. I want your take on how that all played out and whether you can bring guns over there into the hallowed halls. We'll take a break and we'll come back, get his answer, and get into some details of what Joe asked about. And then we'll take more of your phone calls. If you're on hold, stay there. We got some lines open. Your questions about guns, firearms, along the lines of the laws here in the state of Tennessee, or anything else, John Harris will take a crack at it right after this. Stay with us.